Okay, we're going to get started here. We have KD and Matt who are going to talk us through how to migrate from Snowflake to Databricks SQL. Please don't forget at the end of the session to fill out a survey that helps us inform us as to which sessions you want to hear more of and more about. And without further ado, I present my friends Matt and KD.
Thanks, Liko. As Liko introduced us, I'm KD, Koundinya. People call me KD. And Matt?
I'm Matt Holzapfel.
So we will be talking today about how you migrate off Snowflake. And when we decided to schedule this call, we chose, hey, this is the time. And we just wanted to make sure the people who are here really, really do want to migrate off Snowflake. I know you're keeping you all away from your happy hour. And if I had my way, I would have had brought the bar here. But here we are. Some usual sort of standard operating procedure for us. Some of the information we'll share today is forward-looking roadmap. So this is the standard disclaimer around that. And as Liko's called out, we'd appreciate any feedback on the session, the content, what we had to share here as well. We both are part of the product adoption group. I specifically focus on Databricks SQL. And a big part of my job is around making sure customers, as they adopt Databricks SQL, whatever their friction, their experiences are, optimizing that. And migrations happen to be a big source of how customers get onboarded and adopt Databricks. Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, and I specifically focus on helping our customers who are looking to interoperate with Snowflake or migrate workloads from Snowflake over to Databricks. So between the two of us, we see a lot of customers kind of going through this journey and working with them at different parts of it.
We'll very briefly touch on why customers are looking to migrate off Snowflake. And this plays pretty significantly into your strategy around what approach you take for migrating. For example, when we get into strategy, one of the things Matt will talk about is this ETL first versus BI first kind of an approach. And that knowing that why, grounding your strategy and why you're actually moving is super important. We'll also go through the approach itself. How do you incorporate these different processes, tooling, the methodology? Quite often, when it comes to migrations, people think of conversion as code conversion as being the most critical piece of the migration. It is to some extent, but there are more important, equally important phases of the migration around data validation, and we will talk about approaches related to that too. Matt?
All right, so to start, let's talk about why migrate. And before we get into that, I'm interested to understand where you all are at in your journey. And so how many people, by a show of hands, are actively migrating from Snowflake to Databricks? You're in flight right now. OK? How many are convinced you are going to migrate, and so you want to get some ideas and best practices for how to do it? All right. And then last group, on the fence, maybe migrate. You want to see what it's like, and then you'll decide from there. All right, great. Great, so we have a little bit of everything, and we're going to touch on, really kind of the full end-to-end journey, and so try to hit on as much of that as possible. But for the folks who are in the middle of the migration, please share your experiences with your fellow kind of Databricks community members, because that's how I think really these go well, is just by understanding and hearing a lot of perspectives. And so why migrate off of Snowflake and onto Databricks? It's really three reasons: cost, governance, AI, ML. And so cost, kind of in particular, what a lot of customers see on Snowflake is as the data volume scales up, as the scale of their ETL jobs scales up, the cost starts to increase exponentially. People love very predictable, low cost on ETL, and that's one of the real advantages and strengths of Databricks. And so that is probably the most common reason that people migrate from Snowflake onto Databricks. But some of the other reasons that we see, kind of in particular for customers who've migrated one or two workloads over from Snowflake to Databricks, seen some cost savings, they'll decide to make Databricks the whole platform, partially because the governance suite is so strong with Unity Catalog, where you're able to have this unified governance layer across all formats, all use cases. And so that's another big reason for people to kind of shift more to Databricks. And then finally, for those who were at the keynote this morning, you saw the awesome stuff we rolled out around Gen AI, around ML Flow 3. We continue to invest very heavily in AI ML, and we want to be able to serve both people who are looking for very low code type experiences and then people who want a lot of configuration in that full ML ops tool chain. So that's the other reason for migrating. And so that's really kind of tied to the key benefits of migrating. It's just the inverse of those challenges is on Databricks you see lower TCO, better governance, and then you're able to drive that innovation agenda. One of the things that we're super proud of that was just released last week was that we were ranked #1 in both vision and execution on Gartner's 2025 Data Science and Machine Learning Magic Quadrant. First time we were ranked #1 on both dimensions over the hyperscalers and others within the space. And I think the kind of TCO story is well known, and for people who are just now getting started in AI/ML or kind of starting to embrace it more and more, I think you'll see a lot of stuff there, as you saw earlier today. And so just to kind of summarize, why customers migrate and the key benefits, I think this quote ties it up nicely, which the headlines. We can now get the data quickly and easily. I think one of the key use cases that customers will migrate from Snowflake to Databricks is often when there's a streaming use case and there's very high and kind of diverse data that needs to be ingested. And so the platform is really, really strong at being able to give you more of that kind of real-time experience that a lot of your internal stakeholders are starting to expect, and some of our customers like Eric have really seen the benefits after doing the migration. And so finally, for why migrating, it's never been easier. And so one of the great advantages of first, what kind of we talked about this morning of everyone's embracing Lakehouse. Everyone's starting to embrace open formats. Everyone here gets to benefit from that. All of us in the community get to benefit because now that makes it easier for you to interoperate between platforms. A lot of the things that Snowflake released last week around interoperability just kind of further advance this story, making it easier for you to keep data in an open format, interoperate between the two platforms, and then migrate the workloads where you see kind of strong advantages from shifting those over to Databricks. And then finally, this is just a tried and true motion. We saw how many people in the room are going through a migration. There are even more people in the other rooms and at the happy hour who've completed a migration. And so strongly encourage everyone to work with your account teams, work with the folks at Databricks to help find other customers who've gone through the migration if you're looking for more stories and more insights, because this has become a very kind of common practice for us.
Okay, there's one important aspect of understanding why you migrate, right? This is something, as Matt talks about the approaches, he'll tie it back to this why, right? That why is going to influence, are you going to move the serving layer first? Are you going to move the ETL layer first? And that is actually going to have a very major impact in how you actually start to see the value. Now, before we get far ahead, I'm going to spend the next maybe 10, 15 minutes talking about how some of our customers, how we recommend they start approaching migrations, right? So there is a tried and tested approach that we recommend. From our point of view, migration tooling is often where a lot of practitioners say, hey, think that is where they need to focus. But it comes back to standard practices around, hey, how you approach these migrations, right? We have identified 5 different phases. Number one, where you actually understand and assess your landscape, your estate that you're going to move. Very often when you look at say, a data warehouse instance, you're just looking at some aggregate number. Hey, I have so many terabytes, I have so many tables, I have so many databases that I need to move, but you don't actually dive deeper into, say, some lineage-based tooling to understand, hey, do I need to actually move all this? Or should I prioritize certain portions of my estate, right? So that is where assessment is super critical. Once you've assessed your current sort of footprint, the current architecture, you then start getting into defining the target state. And defining the target state, again, there's a couple of things that you need to make a decision around. Hey, do I actually try to modernize? Very often, as customers adopted Snowflake, they more than likely transitioned, migrated from some other legacy data warehouse. And as they were making that sort of change, you probably carried on some of the tech debt from that legacy warehouse too. Do I actually pause, take a break, and say, hey, this is my opportunity to modernize and retire, remove some of the tech debt? Or no, my business needs are such that I do need to continue to carry some of that over into the next stage, and then eventually somewhere down the line, I'm going to modernize. So that's where we are defining the target platform, and hey, do I modernize? Do I do something closer to lift and shift? Kind of, you land in this middle space, which is what I would call as minimum viable sort of replatforming. That is a delicate balance that you need to figure out right around that stage. Number 3, you get into this, hey, do I take care of moving the ingestion ETL first, or do I do BI first, right? There are a few considerations. Matt will go over about that. The area which, number 4, is what most customers, most practitioners tend to pay less attention to is the validation, right? Hey, can we actually, rather than going with this big bang approach, it is quite beneficial to do like an MVP, kind of a horizontal tracer bullet where you identify 3 or 4 different patterns, take a few pipelines for each one of those patterns, and then actually get that migrated end to end. That is a approach that helps you figure out, hey, what are the landmines that I need to navigate before you actually go for a full-scale migration. And number 5, this is where you actually start getting into implementation, right? This is where your tooling, conversion tooling comes into picture. This is where quite often the data governance and modeling is something customers tend to approach last, starting early with actually looking at governance, performance monitoring is super critical. Now, migrations, it's not all just process. There are some set of hard problems to solve, and this is where tomorrow you'll hear about this in the keynote, and this is just a pre-announcement, so to speak. This is where we are introducing Lakebridge. Lakebridge is a conglomerate, is a collection of different migration tooling that some of it is homegrown, some of it comes from an acquisition we did earlier in the year with Lakebridge. And the different phases of the migration, it helps you actually understand when you're in that assessment phase, this is where we have the profiler that actually can look at not just your code, but also the deployment of your Snowflake instances, all your different virtual warehouses, and help understand, hey, what is the level of utilization and usage, and then tie that together with the code that our analyzer runs and scans and understands what's the complexity. So it kind of combines the usage and the complexity of the code that you're trying to migrate. The next, much later closer to your implementation stage, this is where the code converter comes in. The initial phase of our release does not yet include a GenAI-based solution, but our goal is to basically leverage generative AI, use large language models, and you'll hear much more details about this. Definitely check it out at the keynote tomorrow. Once you have converted your code, and not just the code, but also your DDL, then you get to actually moving the data, and Lakeflow Connect comes into picture here. In certain cases, you rely on Lakeflow Connect. In other cases, you rely on other native tooling or other tooling sometimes customers already have it. Right? Last but, in my opinion, one of the most important ones is the validation itself. Hey, you have your source and target systems running in like production parallel. How do you know the actual transformation that's been done by either the LLM or our rules or AST-based engines are they accurate, right? This is where the validation comes in. It will help you compare this, and it will help you figure out what's the source of this disparity when you actually see a problem. And we support this for many different sources, and this is historically something, there's been a ton of experience and expertise and knowledge that we picked up from the Lakebridge acquisition. So a lot of the legacy warehouses, Teradata, Oracle, Exadata, and Snowflake itself, we have the ability to help migrate from. Now, kind of fitting this back into the process, the 5-step process that I was talking about, it starts with, like, once you've done that assessment, and that assessment is, as I mentioned before, not just looking at your code, but also looking at utilization and usage information. You could have a 100 terabyte or a petabyte, sized storage, but if your pipelines are basically populating this data tables which are not being utilized as much, that's a that's an opportunity for you to do some rationalization, right? And once you've gotten past that and you get to the architecture, you now start to understand, hey, what are all the different dependencies? It's not all just about moving the code, but all the different tools that touch this. Hey, you have, more than likely, you're probably using dbt, you're probably using Airflow for orchestration. What do you actually need to do to basically repoint those? That's an important point of assessment. There are plenty of tools available for getting this sort of assessment, understanding your current state. Now, we've taken a lot of that, baked it into Lakebridge. The Lakebridge not only includes a profiler, but an analyzer as well, so it can tie this sort of the utilization information as well as your code estate and DDL estate, right? And generally, when we see customers approaching migrations, they are typically thinking about everything that is the second, what's in the funnel. The business case is not something they're thinking about, right? That's where my call to action would be to start thinking in terms of business case, identifying, hey, what for a particular domain, for a particular business case, what are the databases, users, the objects, and what are the different sort of interactions that I need to actually take care of. Rather than going at, I'm going to go take on my entire Snowflake estate, break it down into business cases, and you migrate business case by business case based on priorities. The profiler itself actually helps go gather a lot of that metadata, right? So going back whether it's the DDL, whether it's the actual, all the different users, the roles, their access control, we have the ability to go pull all that using this automated tooling, right? Now, this also helps you kind of understand, hey, what is your footprint on Databricks going to actually look like, right? Hey, if this is your current utilization on Snowflake, you can actually start modeling, hey, what my utilization is going to look like and what my cost is going to look like on Databricks, right? Once you have assessed that, you now have to start getting into the target state. This is where understanding your data architecture, your data model, starting to map that to Databricks, which really should be pretty much carrying it forward as it is. You just have to take care of certain best practices around data modeling, which I'll touch on in just a moment. Now, one thing to remember here is one size fits all doesn't generally apply. There's always nuances. There's always some bit in your architecture. Maybe there's some type of an integration that you kind of have to look at differently. So this is an opportunity to record that, document that. And again, if this varies by business use case, this is the opportunity to define that. I mentioned this earlier, right? As part of that defining the architecture, you should be looking at your data modeling early on, right? So so generally, if you're coming from the data warehousing sort of world, you have multiple data modeling techniques, you have data vault, you have star schema, Snowflake schema, and then you often hear in the context of the lakehouse, the medallion architecture. How do this kind of meld together? This visual kind of neatly puts them into sort of this bronze, silver, gold category. So you're on the left, you have your bronze and silver. This is typically your landing and ingestion. And on the right, you have your presentation layer, all the various data marts that basically end up in the gold layer. And everything in between, which is the integration, whatever you want to call it, basically lands in your silver. Now, you can basically take that same data model and carry it over here. There are a whole bunch of best practices around, hey, the primary key, foreign key definitions, you need to bring those as well as part of your DDL so that Unity Catalog understands those relationships. When Unity Catalog understands those relationships and you go to Databricks SQL and run a query, we have the ability to actually use hints and then optimize those queries and those joins. The phase decommissioning is something that is critical. I mentioned this briefly, right? Everyone thinks of, hey, I'm just going to take this big behemoth and I'm going to move it over. Instead, it's very pragmatic. And this is also where you start to see, your businesses start to see value sooner. You take this approach where you figure out, hey, all these different business cases I have, what is their priority, right? And then sequence your migration based on that priority. This helps you basically maximize your ROI. You see value, your business sees value sooner, and minimize risk by taking on these more important use cases first.
All right. And in terms of methodologies and strategies, there are really two primary ones that we recommend. ETL first, which I would say is the most common, but not necessarily always the best fit. This is great if TCO is the primary driver of your migration. You're looking to get down the total cost of ownership of ETL as quickly as possible. So you start there, you get that relief, and then you're able to ultimately, kind of in the end, push to the serving layer. Alternatively, you can work backwards. And so a new pattern that we're starting to see a bit more and also advocate for a bit more is around BI first. Another way to think of this is gold layer first. I want to shift my gold layer from my legacy to Databricks right away so that I can start serving that to end users. The business can start benefiting from Databricks as quickly as possible, and specifically in the context of advanced analytic and AI use cases. And so which strategy is right for you depends on what your driver is, but certainly both worth considering as you go through the migration. We'll start with ingestion and ETL first. This is perhaps the more intuitive of the two processes or the two strategies. And step one here is first shifting the pipes, or really kind of adding the pipes so that you're also pushing the operational data stores into the bronze layer within Databricks or Delta Lake or Iceberg. And then from there, now we want to marry those with the snapshot of the silver layer from our legacy data warehouse. Specifically, we want to make sure we maintain that history. And so we push that over into the bronze layer with all of the kind of continuous feeds that are coming from our operational data sources. Marry that data together within the silver layer in Databricks, push that into our data marts in the gold layer. We start to have both the legacy data warehouse, Snowflake, and Databricks serving. And then this is where we're able to go through that validation step that KD highlighted previously. That's so important. We've set up the full end-to-end pipeline. We could validate that what's coming out the other end works. We get the performance that we're expecting. Users are accepting it. And then from there, then we could do the cutover and shift to a full migration where now our pipeline in our warehouse is purely within Databricks. Alternatively, we can take a BI first approach. So that first approach, we're basically kind of building up step by step, focused on ETL first, and then getting to serving. Alternatively, if we want to give our end consumers access to that data within their BI tools, we want to start doing serving early. We want to enable users to take advantage of MLflow 3 as quickly as possible and all of the other great innovations that have been coming out. What we could do is we could push the gold layer to Databricks so that now your gold layer is and your serving layer is in Databricks. People could start using it there. We're still running the pipeline that we had with with Snowflake in parallel, but we're incrementally now starting to move more and more of the source data into Databricks. What's important here is, not only are we taking what's in the serving layer in Snowflake, making that available to Databricks, but also now we're going to start joining in and augmenting with more sources. And so this next tranche of work from step 2 on is really about how do we start marrying the new sources, and then that's what's going to drive ultimately the cutover, where kind of very similar to what we saw in the ETL first migration, we're building out that pipe from bronze to silver to gold, running the two in parallel, doing our validation. Once we are confident in what we're seeing from price, performance, as well as the actual data being validated, then we're able to do that cutover. And so both kind of ultimately lead to the same destination, but here we started with gold layer, we're serving right away. ETL, we're getting to ETL cost savings more quickly, we're shifting that over more quickly, and then doing the cutover. And now to dig into kind of some of those details, we'll look at the kind of code conversion piece on how we actually do that.
Cool. Quick question, show of hands, how many of you are evaluating Genie right now? Okay, cool. One person. Yeah, so the BI first approach is definitely one that I would consider, right, if you're looking to unlock Genie so that you don't have to wait for all the ETL pipelines, set up the CDC and start evaluating Genie to see, hey, is this something that my business can get value, right? And that's definitely one of the cases where our customers are looking at the BI first kind of an approach, right? So once you have figured out which approach you're going to take, code conversion is the critical problem to solve for, right? So here we have Lakebridge. Lakebridge itself comes from kind of two places. We used to have an internally homegrown tool called Remorph. We acquired Lakebridge as well. We kind of brought both together. Remorph kind of is where a lot of the Snowflake intelligence kind of be carried over into Lakebridge. There's, in fact, a great blog by DoorDash. Happy to distribute that link. So with Lakebridge, we basically take your DDL, right? So before you actually move the code, you have to move the metadata about all these different tables, the schemas, et cetera, right? So Lakebridge helps you take all this Snowflake SQL and basically turn that into, I wouldn't call it Databricks SQL, we basically convert it into ANSI SQL, right? Because Databricks SQL adheres to the ANSI standards, so any sort of code, any sort of assets that you migrate over, this is another open standard that we are basically embracing here. So this is where you get tons of automation. Now, if you do have a bunch of stored procedures that you have running on your Snowflake, that is something we are looking to add and incorporate into Lakebridge itself, so your stored procedure itself can come over. Databricks SQL now also supports stored procedures and multi-statement transactions. Very often in our experience, a common place where customers trip up is around this different data types. And we have a pretty strong practice of doing these migrations from within our professional services, as well as our partner ecosystem, where we have this well-defined recipes on, hey, if you have these types of Snowflake data types, this is what the conversion should look like. And a lot of those will be basically translated converted by Lakebridge. Once you have done your conversion of your DDLs as well as the code, you then get into the data. How do I actually move the data itself? Now, historically, the third option here, right, the Snowflake connector, where we just go to the native source of the native formats that Snowflake has, the proprietary native format, we basically pull from there and then write it into the lakehouse, right? So that's historically, we've used the connector to do that. Now, the downside of that is you are basically, even just for moving the data, there's double compute. You need to spin up this warehouse, the Snowflake virtual warehouse, to basically pull that data and then write it into, or at least offload it to a staging area, and then you have to kind of pull it into Databricks. The approach that we are gravitating more and more towards is the iceberg table approach. So we are going to be announcing also support for managed iceberg. So quite a few previews that quite a few announcements I'm giving you a preview about here in this talk. Now with managed iceberg support within Unity Catalog, the fact that Snowflake also has a managed iceberg approach kind of actually helps us with migration too. So from Snowflake, from the native table, you basically offload the data into a managed iceberg table. And that means that is all data that's still within the same cloud region, so there really should be no cost for you to go from Snowflake native to the managed iceberg, right? There's no egress cost, at least, that you're paying for. And once the data is there in iceberg, we now have the ability to read that from Databricks, right? So Unity Catalog can federate into Snowflake and start reading that data. Now, once you're able to read that data and start doing migrating some of your pipelines, you will probably likely not write back into the production table. You'll probably have like a shadow table. That's where you'll be doing the ETL and writing your data. That's where you'll be doing the validation. And then eventually, when you are ready to actually cut over, we are looking to add the ability to take a Snowflake managed iceberg table and flip it into a UC managed iceberg table. Right, so what that means is what used to be like a read-only source for us now also becomes writable for us. Right? So this is the approach that we expect increasingly our customers will take. Now, meanwhile, there are cases where even as you're going through this approach, hey, even if you're not yet ready, or not at a place where you are ready to adopt Iceberg, right? Federation is quite handy, but generally federation, Lakehouse federation, this is where you take a Snowflake catalog, bring it into Databricks as a foreign catalog, and here the format is still native format that I'm talking about. And then you can start doing some exploratory analysis. This is helpful for ad hoc exploration, but generally when it comes to data movement, depending on the data size, you can pull it off, but as you start getting into larger data volume, this is not something we would recommend. There are different considerations, right? Cost is one of the consideration. You have this compute, performance is another consideration. So generally, more and more, we believe the iceberg sort of pattern is what our customers will take.
And just on the iceberg piece, as he alluded to, we're adding more capabilities. Tomorrow that we'll be announcing, Snowflake's released a lot of new capabilities. It can be hard to stay up to date on all of those changes. And so if you're implementing the migration yourself, or your team is, and you have questions about how do the different catalogs work together, how does UC work with Horizon catalog, and you want guidance and support, please reach out. Like we understand that this is a very fluid motion, and it's a very kind of new capability that's being brought to market. And so please don't hesitate to ask for help and support if you have any questions on how that interoperability pattern should work.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we have some sufficient time for Q&A. Our MC himself is actually an iceberg expert, so please do reach out to us about that. So as I mentioned previously, the validation is one of the most critical parts of a migration journey that you are going to be on. And this is also the phase of the journey that most people underestimate the level of effort that goes into. And very often, there are going to be these minute differences that you will see. Hey, due to some data type or precision mismatch, something is not working out. Or ordering of the data is off, or case is off, or collation is not enabled. That's the reason these differences are coming about. These are the kinds of issues the data validation tool. So within Lakebridge, one of the components is the reconciler. This helps you figure out, hey, what is the diff between my source and my target? It uses different techniques such as hashing and uses aggregates, first compares the aggregates before it breaks down to the more granular sort of view. Right? I mentioned this earlier, right? So governance and data modeling and security is quite often thought of last, but this should be something you take on early on in your migration planning, right? By governance itself is a heavily loaded term. It could be interpreted many different ways. It starts with, hey, what is my catalog design going to be? What is it going to look like? Largely, it should be the same as it is in Snowflake, but this migration is also an opportunity for you to do some cleanup and do some restructuring if needed, right? Access control is another important aspect. Very often, you're coming from a regulated industry kind of a setup. You have very fine-grained access control, row-based access, column-based access. All those policies you need to bring forward. And attribute-based access control is also in public preview. There are new capabilities that we have introduced there. This policy-based sort of access control should actually help simplify a lot of that. And lastly, this is something that is usually turned on last, the very last phase of a migration project, but something you should start early, which is around FinOps and budgeting and tagging, setting up the right tagging policies, setting up the right budget policies by the different business units. So if you have a certain FinOps model in Snowflake, hey, how does that actually translate into Databricks, right? Start early with performance. So typically, I would say once you have done the code conversion, pretty much as you start some of the data validation, that is also the time where you start doing some of this performance monitoring, testing, load testing, et cetera. So we have, this is something we'll share tomorrow as well. Over the last 3 years, just even looking at the most commonly run queries, if you look at that, the performance of those have improved almost 77% in just that period. And this is not benchmarks, this is actual queries that our customers run. And one of the most important takeaways in getting that performance optimization is managed tables. As long as you pick managed tables, there's a whole bunch of performance benefits that follow through. We will automatically do predictive optimization. So the way the data is laid out on the storage, we will automatically optimize that. We'll vacuum the data. We will pick the right clustering keys. So we have auto-liquid clustering. So just by making that one simple choice, a lot of those benefits come through. Also important is the iceberg, right? So the managed iceberg is something we are able to actually offer for managed tables. Technical details I can get into much more, but that also gives you that ability to integrate with a much larger ecosystem. Say you want to actually hook up your Trino or hook up your Snowflake, this becomes significantly simpler. I'm a technologist at heart, and this is something I'm guilty of, so I just want to make sure, right? It's not all just about the technology. It's important to capture throughout your journey, hey, what is the value that is being driven? And this is important so that your relationship with your business deepens. You are actually focusing on the high value use cases as opposed to just more somewhat blindly going after taking on this big estate and moving that over, right? It's not about the infrastructure, it's about the business. And this just helps you basically get into a more healthy organization that you can grow, right? So the key takeaways here, number one, tooling and accelerators are key, and we have a whole bunch of offerings here. Lakebridge is something we are going to announce tomorrow. We also have partners who have their own tooling and accelerators. It's not so much about, hey, our tool is better than any other in the ecosystem. When it comes to tooling, our whole point of view is that we want the ecosystem to benefit, so that is something we are looking to provide for free to the ecosystem. These are important, but equally important, or if not more, is methodology, right? Methodology is super important, tying that methodology back to the reason you're actually migrating. Hey, if TCO is why you're looking to migrate, yeah, go ahead, migrate the ETL first. But if you're actually looking to unblock some AI use cases or Genie use cases, the BI first migration is an important consideration. Iceberg is also not only critical from open sort of adopting the open ecosystem, but also from a migration standpoint, it's an important tool that can help you accelerate migrations, right? And lastly, but probably one of the first things that you should do is address governance, data modeling, and performance. With that, we have about just 48 seconds, I guess, for Q&A. If people don't mind, we can.
We'll be around for a few minutes also, so feel free to swing by and ask questions if you have more. Thank you.